Okay, it's 8 o'clock. We're going to call this joint meeting of the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee to order, February 27th, 2016. The purpose of which is to review budgets and articles, the significant budgets and articles, if you will, associated with FY 2017. So to get started, would you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
That's all I'm saying, yeah.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And the jets fly over in the same hand formation.
Thank you. And just a few housekeeping items. We have about a dozen or so members here. We only have a few microphones, so we all need to, as we want to speak, or as we speak, use the microphones. This is being recorded, televised, if you will, so if you need to share mics, share mics. We have an ambitious schedule. We have it set up throughout the day with some breaks, if you will. Lunch will be brought in, but we need to stay on schedule. Historically, when we've done this before, we've always left the articles to the end. This year, we changed it around, so we're going to talk briefly about any articles associated with the different departments, and then get into the budgets. So, and I would also ask that you hold your questions until the individual presenters are done with their presentations, if you will, so we don't get distracted. So with that, I don't know, Dane, did you have anything on the Finance Committee side? You're good. Okay. All right, so first up is the Police Department. Chief and Deputy, welcome.
Thank
How
you.
many stripes do we have between the two of you there? It's like a bunch,
Whole
right?
boatload.
Yeah, it's good.
We're hoping it's going to help us.
You guys get to be first, so you're the trendsetters, if you will. We do know you have on an article, this door-to-door solicitation thing. We know you're coming to us on Monday.
Yes.
As part of the Selectmen's meeting, so I just asked you to give us just, 30 seconds to a minute on what that's all about.
Okay, sure. We ran into an issue where in the spring and summer we had some people interested in selling door-to-door, and there was kind of like, well, go see the fire department, go see town hall. We looked into it. It turns out the town does not have a bylaw on door-to-door sales. And this is something that a lot of communities do have on Cape Cod. For the very good reason that I'm sure a lot of you are probably in the same boat as myself, which is I don't really appreciate somebody knocking on my door trying to sell me something. So that's why they're in effect. It's to address the issue, especially with an aging population. They're very susceptible to like the hard sell and the unscrupulous sales techniques. So this bylaw is designed to, it doesn't say you can't do it, it just regulates it. So because the problem is if we don't have a bylaw, then it's basically allowed. We do have a bylaw that we think may apply if push came to shove that's in existence right now, but it's not specifically targeted towards door-to-door sales. So we thought it was an important bylaw to try and add to the to the group of bylaws. And I know Chief Mason did pass one that's related to this issue also, which allows the town to do criminal records checks of individuals applying for certain types of licenses. The Department of Criminal Justice Information Services up in Chelsea has a fairly strict set of guidelines that have to be followed if you want to do that, believe it or not, even as a police department, to run checks on people doing vending or door-to-door sales. So it's good that that bylaw is on the books, but I really like to see this door-to-door sales bylaw go through as well and protect the citizens. And the best part about it is it has a no solicitation list as part of it, which allows our residents to notify their police department, listen, even if you have a licensed door-to-door salesman, we don't want him knocking on our door. It's like a no-call list for door-to-door sales, basically. And if they violated that, it would be a violation of the bylaw.
Okay.
So that's it in a nutshell.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's move on to the budget.
All right.
We're
Just
gonna
as a,
present this, excuse me, we're going to present this on the screen, or how's this going to work? We're just going to
The
go.
majority of them, we don't have a lot of people that have decided to present on the screen, so you can
Okay,
hear them verbally.
all right, okay.
Tom and I had a 200-slide PowerPoint ready to go, but Chris thought it might not be a very good idea, so.
If you get it down to 199, we'll listen to it.
Save it for Monday.
Just as a lead-in, I want to thank everybody here, actually, the Board of Selectmen, the Town Administrator, the Finance Committee, for your support in my first 6 months on the job here. It's gone very quickly, and obviously your support of the police department. You know, we were before the finance committee requesting a reserve fund transfer very recently, and you wholeheartedly supported that. And the Board of Selectmen has always been very magnanimous with our appointments and promotions and everything else, and the town administrator with his guidance on this process. As you know, this is my first foray into it this deeply, so I appreciate your patience. Any shortcomings are completely mine, believe me. Deputy Chief Gagnon has done a fantastic job with Karen Young back at the station crunching the numbers, and all the heavy lifting is done by them, and I'm just going to do my very best to present it properly. And also, by the way, I hope you all realize, just as a lead-in, what an outstanding police department you really have here in this community. And I don't say that to be self-serving, because I've only been here 6 months. I can't take credit. The credit belongs to those outstanding men and women who make up your police department. And part of our job and our collective jobs is to support those great individuals that are out there in the middle of the night and on holidays and everything else, being responsive to the community. So we hope that this budget accomplishes that. We think it does. We will do our very best to answer any questions you have as clearly and as concisely as we can. And if we don't have the answer this morning, we'll certainly make every effort to get you the answer. Okay? So if I could just do just a quick overview of what this budget entails. The good thing is that the total increase on salaries and wages is like 0.1%, and that does include a request for an extra position. So, you know, I can give you a rundown very quickly. If you would like me to go through question by question, or if you want me to just give like a quick overview.
Chief,
how would
give
you
us
like
an
that?
overview. Tell us what the highlights are. We're particularly interested in things that have changed,
Okay.
or new things, if you will.
All right, well, obviously, why don't we start off with the request for the new position? We do not take this lightly. I understand that. This would be, you know, create an increase in the budget, but not a tremendous increase, because a lot of our increases on the salary and wage side were offset by a number of senior officers and ranking officers retiring, and that offset within the budget. So that's why the 0.1%. But I think if any of you have been following the newspapers or anything, you realize that there is a serious drug issue all across the Cape, and Harwich is not immune from that. In 2015, we saw, you know, double-digit overdose numbers, and 4 individuals die from heroin overdoses. And in 2016, the sheet we have available for the public actually says so far this year we've had 1. It actually is 2. I believe, right, Deputy Chief? 2 heroin overdoses. So if we stay on that track, we're looking at possibly doubling the number of deaths related to heroin in this community, which is extraordinary because, you know, 5-6 years ago, a heroin overdose death was very rare for a community this size. So we feel we have an obligation to try and address that. Obviously, there are some other people in town doing some great work with treatment and education, but we feel the law enforcement piece, we'd like to be able to add one final piece to our approach to it, which is a patrol investigator position, and that individual would be trained up, and the new officer obviously would backfill his 40 hours and allow him, it is a patrol-related position, but it would allow him to address the street-level drug issue in conjunction with our task force officer and with our detective unit. So that's one of the major highlights in our on the personnel side. And just as an aside, you know, we are doing something still, even without this extra position. You know, we just seized in a task force related case off about 190 grams of heroin, which is a huge amount of heroin, just about 2 weeks ago. So you know, our inclusion in the task force is also critical, but I see this piece, I've seen this model work very well before, so this is an important position for us to try and get in our budget. So that's the major personnel difference. I can run through the expenses. Obviously, the highlight on the expense side, on the capital, it's about results in about a $12,000 increase. We're requesting 4 cruisers this year, 3 utility vehicles. Tom and I talked about it, and we'd like to eventually see a change over to all utility vehicles, which are the all-wheel drive vehicles. They're better in the rain, they're better in the snow. So 3 marked utilities and 1 expedition for the chief. Now, with that being said, the reason for the expedition as opposed to a standard utility is, we talked about this also, it adds the, the real true four-wheel drive capability to the fleet. I don't know if any of you have utility vehicles, but in the snow, they can still get hung up. They're better than a two-wheel drive or a front-wheel drive, but they still get hung up. So if we have to go off-road or into deep snow, we like to have the capability. So with the pickup and yours and an extra expedition, we'd actually have 4, which would have true four-wheel drive capability, which is kind of critical for a
Chief,
department.
just to be clear on that one, if someone needed that four-wheel drive capability, I'm sure they can take your vehicle, right? This is
Yeah,
your
absolutely,
vehicle.
yeah.
So it's not
Yeah.
necessarily,
Not-
you're the other one who can drive.
Not necessarily a citizen you're talking about, you mean
Yeah,
a
yeah. No,
police
no, no,
officer,
no,
right?
no.
Yeah.
But Tommy,
Yes.
if Tommy needed it, you could go use it.
Absolutely, that's what we're talking about. It gives the department the capability, because I'm most likely, if we're having a blizzard, going to be in the EOC,
Right,
the
right.
Emergency
Understand.
Operations Center.
Understand.
So that's the reasoning behind that for the 4-vehicle request.
Got it.
Any additional, let's see, on the expense side, there were some increases on the expense side, but a lot of those, there were a couple items that we had built into the budget. One was replacing the carpeting for about $25,000, and one was repaving the back lot for, was it 13, Tom? 13,000. We have a parking issue. We like to host training at Harwich PD. It's good for the town, it's good for the department, it's good for the officers, but we're having trouble putting cars in places. So we'd really like to pave an extra strip on that lower lot and try and get more parking down there. There was a third item that's under communications, though. We wanted to do a small remodel in the communications to move the desk more visible in the window, but that's under a different budget. No other major expense increases that I can recall right now. Do you have any? Unless you want to run down the individual line items, or if you have any specific questions, we'd be happy to handle.
Okay, hang on one second. Chris, do you have anything on this you want, anything extra you want to add to this before we get into a question and answer?
I think the chief's done a good job of doing an overview, just so the board's aware that there were requests for the software that was done as part of a Finance Committee reserve fund transfer, as well as some additional, not body armor, but shields, I guess.
Plate carriers, right, ballistic plate carriers, it'll stop a rifle round.
So those 2 were approved, so they were left in the budget, so we'll take those 2 items out because the Finance Committee did approve those earlier, so we didn't capture that. I think that's the only items to note. We did leave in the operating budget some of those items on the reconfiguration of the dispatch area, and those are still in the budget, so you will see in the materials that were distributed, Article 11 and 12 are a list of what we're funding out of free cash. Anything else that's highlighted will be funded out of the existing operating budget or tax levy.
If I may, just by way of correction, when we went for the reserve fund transfer, it was 3 items: the policy software, the handguns, and the plate carriers. The plate carriers were never built into the budget. So, but there are still 2 items in the budget now: the $6,000 for the pistols and the $6,200 for the Power DMS policy software. So there's about $12,000 that's still in there that has already been transferred into FY16, courtesy of the Finance Committee.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, what we've done in the past, and we're planning on doing again this year, is we're going to do a budget amendment, so we'll highlight those 2, so that way you'll know those will come up when we group a bunch of them together. We'll do that.
Okay. Questions? Rich? Yeah, use the microphone, please, thank you. And speak into the microphone. Amy will be happy.
In terms of terminology, I have Muni's in front of me, a copy of it. The definition, or what the chief was saying, is that your police cars, or whatever the crest, that's still coming out of your budget. It's not a capital outlay. And I think you should change that in Muni's because it's a bit confusing.
Okay.
Yeah, we could take a look at the description. It's really operating capital that is just, they need cars every year, so
Oh, I
we do treat
understand,
it
but
as
we
an
treat,
operating.
we treat it as an expense every year.
Yeah.
It's not a capital expense. It's not a capital outlay. It's not on the budget in terms of the capital plan. So I just want to clear that up so that we don't miss, it's not missed later on.
Okay, we'll go right down the row here. Maureen?
Hi, Chief.
Hi.
The information you provided was wonderful. Really, really appreciate it.
Maureen, could you bring that mic a little closer? You really need to, we want to hear
Very
you at
rare
home.
that I'm
That's
asked
okay.
to speak
When I
out,
watch,
but
when I watch this
no
tomorrow, I want to be able
problem.
to hear you.
Just one question.
Sure.
On the communication section, you know, I know you've had so many changes going on with dispatch, but obviously the overtime, you know, pretty much doubled within the last 18 months or so. So I was just wondering if you could expand on that a little bit.
Okay, I think that's basically due to contractual increases. We didn't plan on adding any additional overtime to
Well, I mean-
communications.
Well, what I was referring to was it looks like you used 70,000 in FY15, but last year it went up to, for the budget, 117, and now continues up to 134,000, so pretty much a
Okay.
double.
Yeah, we did have an issue in the collective bargaining process over the last couple of years in which, try to make it a long story short, there was an issue in which when the dispatchers changed from the fire schedule, the 24-hour schedule, to the schedule that's the police schedule, the 37 and a half, when the calculation was done on their hourly rate, the calculation wasn't done correctly. So we had to fix that in the negotiations, which led to a increase in the amount of base pay that they received, and that led to an increase in the budget to cover those numbers.
But, you know, I don't see the same kind of up in the salaries, you know, that I do in the overtime, so it almost seemed like there had to be a component of usage, but,
Maybe Tom has,
Yeah, there was a slight issue regarding, and Mr. Clark is correct, the way overtime was figured, I guess, computed, whatever term you want to use, in which there were some errors noted. And now it has been, as Mr. Clark said, through collective bargaining, it has been rectified, and that corrected a major flaw.
thank you.
Larry?
Chief, on the,
You have to use the microphone, Larry. Sorry.
the additional staff concentrating on drug use, does that entail spatial training as well?
Yes. You know, probably a 40-hour narcotics school. At least we're going to leave that to Detective Sergeant Brackett to train that officer up. But we figured we could absorb that into the budget. Tom, I don't think you put any additional training hours.
No, we have
Use the mic,
line
please.
items for training, and Lieutenant Sullivan is in charge of the detective unit, and this is going to be a combination between Lieutenant Sullivan and Lieutenant Considine to work on the training aspect of it with Sergeant Brackett. But we do have funds available for training, along with each officer has a training budget that officer themselves can use. So we're requesting no significant increase in our budget for training for this position.
With the addition of this personnel, ostensibly because of the issues around the opiate crisis on Cape Cod, I know Truro and other towns around the Commonwealth have developed a program, especially to get at stemming with the tide of deaths due to overdoses, of pairing officers on sort of follow-up visits with people that have come into contact with either the police department or the emergency medical folks with therapists to engage them and connect them with services. And I'm wondering if some of this additional resources will allow your department to start in, because, you know, quite honestly, if you want to stop the tide of deaths due to overdoses, getting people into treatment is the issue.
Oh, absolutely. We agree. We agree, but we also agree that you know, as I've stated publicly before, it's more than just treatment. It's never just treatment. It's never just education and prevention. And it has to be the big three, and enforcement's part of that. And that's really the piece that I see is missing. Detective Sergeant Brackett right now does host a Gosnold support services, and I know I have read of follow-up visits from our officers. So, you know, we'll revisit that and again try and improve our overall package on how to approach this thing. And there are a lot of different ways to do it, like the Gloucester model, you know, is getting a lot of press recently. But it is very challenging. But I think we can't ignore the enforcement piece either. So I agree with you 100%, Ed. We need to look at it from all angles and improve, you know, get people into treatment as well as. But you know, oddly enough, and detectives and lieutenants will agree with you, sometimes the only way to get somebody into treatment is to arrest them. So you know, it's a double-edged sword. So that's what we're looking for.
Just one additional thought. Outer Cape Health, who's in our community, is one of the major providers in the Outer Cape, Lower and Outer Cape, of outpatient addiction treatment services, and possibly it might be worth engaging them in a conversation to coordinate activities, because
Absolutely.
it's been shown, you know, the joining up of police officer with therapist sort of adds an added dimension to the offer of treatment services that you just don't get when somebody's been directed to a 12-step program
Right.
or something.
Right.
Greg, and if I could just follow up quickly, is that the program that our detective unit, Detective Brackett, Lieutenant Sullivan have implemented, they do home visits with the Gosnell people as it is now. If we do have an incident involving an OD, we do follow-up at the home and with a counselor quite often in attendance.
Okay, thanks. Going to move this along. Mark?
I have no questions for today.
Okay, Jack?
Good morning.
Morning.
I'm wondering what your, at this time, thinking is about added positions in the next 2 to 3 years by year. Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
We talked about it a little bit, you know, also along the guidelines of, okay, what if miraculously the drug problem goes away, and this officer came on board to do just that. There's plenty to do. I see potentially in the future the opportunity for potentially one more as we focus on branching out into more intense community service-oriented pieces in the patrol area, and not in plain clothes or anything. And that would be, you know, obviously to augment the patrol force during the busy season, but then also give them an opportunity to have some extra time to do the community-related work. So that's about all I see in the coming few years.
Thank you.
Nina?
Just one quick one. Community policing, are those kind of patrols now done overtime, or are they done with your existing force out as a regular patrol? I know we squeezed that budget real tight when we were doing all the school stuff, but you've been able to get some of that back. I'm just wondering if it's just been overtime, or is it other ways?
It's actually a combination.
The answer to that is yes.
We like to make it as much of a combination as possible, but the overtime isn't built into the budget for that type of application for special events and for response to community concerns in the neighborhoods and issues such as that. Tom, anything else?
Right, well, Lieutenant Considine has reinstituted, I guess would be the correct word, a lot of the neighborhood watch groups, meeting more with, in addition to our school resource officers, going out in the schools, speaking at churches and like that. I know that he gave a talk at a church this past week, and the chief is giving talks to any men's group, women's group, whatever requested. But the officers also are visiting the businesses and like that on duty, not overtime. And then as the weather gets better, we have our bicycle unit on. And what we do have, and I know with Chief Gilmet here, he will make sure, as I, that the officers, if you're on the bicycle patrol unit and you're working your normal 8 to 4 shift, your bicycle will be on the back of the car with you, and you're going to get out of the car and you're going to get on it and go for a ride and meet and greet people and like that. So we have increased what we're doing.
You're multitasking.
yes.
Yeah, okay. Linda?
Back to Noreen's question on the emergency telecommunications. The budget for FY17 is $453,000 for salary and et cetera, of which 30% is overtime. Have you looked at the possibility of perhaps, does it make sense to add a person to cut down the overtime, or is that a foregone conclusion? Because having a third added on to overtime is really pretty humongous. I don't see that in any but other departments or any other budget.
You wanna take that? You want me-
Sure.
Oh, and I should have used this.
We'll see how you do.
Okay. We are exploring and hopefully instituting during fiscal 17, and we've had discussions with Mr.
Yeah.
Clark extensively about it, and with Charlene now, to bring on additional part-time personnel. Because what happens right now is, for 2 of the shifts at least, for 4 to 12 and midnight, if a dispatcher calls in sick, takes a vacation or anything, that position has to be filled with overtime. And the procedure is the current full-time dispatchers are offered the position first. If that is not filled by one of them, then it becomes available to the uniform patrol staff. And when that happens, it could be a patrol officer that's going to be paid $35 an hour, or a sergeant that could be getting paid $60-something an hour. So what we have budgeted in here now will be funds to get 2 or 3 part-time dispatchers and bring them in to alleviate. So and in the contract that that the town has just signed with them, it gives us the opportunity to do that. And the way it would happen is then, if a dispatcher calls in sick and an overtime is needed, it would go to the dispatcher, followed by the reserve dispatcher, and then to patrol if none were available. And to keep the reserve dispatcher sharp, because there are funds now built into that, they could come in after their training. We would keep them sharp by having them work a shift or 2, or 3, 4 month, just so they can keep on their toes.
Got it.
We also have to budget in there for anything that could happen, such as pregnancy and everything else, sickness, and that costs a lot of money.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Peter?
Janelle?
Just-
Hang on a second, we're gonna go this way, we're gonna run out of time before too long. So Janelle,
No questions.
Michael,
No questions.
Angelo?
A comment rather than a question. I understand the need for a new officer, but that impact will hit us in the next couple of years, not only in salary, but in pensions and everything else. It would probably be helpful if you took a look at the cost to the town over the next 4 or 5 years of the personnel that you want to have, because then we can deal with it a lot better, because salary is, only about 60% of the cost, and actually less for the police department. Thank you.
You all set, Angelo?
Yep.
Ed, did you have a
Just an
comment?
informational question. In a lot of the salary and wage things in the Munis report, the first line is PTS and WYRROU. What does that stand for?
Part-time.
What's the WY?
Part-time worker, I'm assuming.
Part-time worker in what?
Let's see how it goes.
Year-round. Part-time, year-round, yeah.
Okay.
Part-time worker year-round.
Okay. All right. Speaking of the mic, please. I'm gonna be the mic police, at least this morning.
You're doing a good job of it. In the past, we've had concerns about having bike patrol on the bike paths. Is enough room in the budget this year to do some of that?
Yeah, that's built into the overtime, and we actually also have Officer Clark out there on the off school time in the morning.
Larry, there's a three-prong approach for that, where this is the chief's first full-time summer. He wasn't able to do a lot of it last year. Is that, as I mentioned before, the officers, if they're on regular patrol, and they're on the bicycle patrol, they have the bicycle with them, they go on the bike paths. We do have Officer Clark in the summertime. He's like our community liaison. In the regular year, he's in the schools. He's out on the bike path. And then we do have additional funds built in for community interaction on the overtime budget as well.
Thank you.
'Cause I write it a lot, so I know what you're saying.
Anybody else? Okay, I want to thank you personally, and I think on behalf of all the citizens of this town and these 2 boards, you guys are keeping us safe. And I mean that's a very important thing. sleepy old Harwich, a lot of people don't realize we have this opiate problem. I always tell people, except for, I'll be a little careful here, but except for murder, we have every crime there is, that every other community, every big city has, on a smaller scale. But unless we keep after it, unless it's folks like you that are out there protecting us every day, it just spirals out of control. So please pass that on to your department, I think on behalf of all of us, certainly. And we certainly appreciate that. And thanks for coming in this morning. If we have more questions on the budget, I'm sure the Finance Committee will be talking to you as we go forward, and certainly the Board of Selectmen. So, thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Have a good day. Jamie, how are we doing with the mic stuff, okay? Doing great. See, you guys are doing okay. What? Heat is coming? When?
It's freezing in here.
The police are here. The heat should have been with them.
Here comes the heat. Here comes the heat.
Yeah, okay.
Has more heat?
I've seen enough of that myself.
So now we'll move on to the fire department.
Gained 7 minutes, Peter.
I know, well, we'll lose it somewhere.
6 minutes.
Soon, I know.
The old guard.
Chief, Deputy, good morning.
Morning.
How are you today?
Great. I just thank the police chief for setting the bar high.
Well, we also gave you a couple extra minutes because, you may need it. You have more articles, so I don't know if you were here when we first started with them, but we're changing the format a little bit from last year. I want you to just briefly hit on the articles first.
Yep.
Briefly, and then we'll get into the budget.
And very quickly, we do have a change this year with Deputy Dave LeBlanc is here. And as part of what we do, and I will say we do very well, our succession plan, as instructed by you, Mr. Chairman, that we maintain, and we do a good job at that. Dave is filled in where the Deputy Fankoff is now the chief in Eastham. He has stepped in. We didn't miss a beat. And in some areas, you get a little different line of thinking.
Right.
We've actually become a little sharper, which is good. So
Okay.
I welcome him, and he's doing an excellent job.
You should tell Deputy LeBlanc that we have high expectations, always sitting right next to you, so it's okay. With that succession plan, we have very high expectations, and you guys always meet or exceed it, so.
We
with
enjoy the
that.
challenge.
Okay, let's go.
Our articles this year, I'll start with a staff vehicle. It's to replace the chief's car. It's just a part of the fleet replacement. I think you have some documentation on that. We try and stretch out the miles on our vehicles, all of our vehicles, and we move them around, everything from the staff cars to the ambulances to the fire trucks. We move them around to get the best bang out of the mileage and the maintenance. So we're in again this year. We weren't successful last year to replace my car, and then the vehicles moved down through the ranks, and that's a simple explanation on that. Next, there's a air compressor that on the air compressor and the boiler and the flooring. I can give you very quick overviews, but that's Sean Libby's thing. He did the research, he did the bidding, he knows the needs, and that's a good thing. So we don't have a lot of detail on some of the reasons why we're doing this. I will tell you, as you know, the station's 20 years old, and the boiler needs substantial repairs. We're having trouble getting parts. We've had times like, well, what we're feeling now, the heat goes down, and understand it's a 24/7 building. So Sean has started a program of replacing essential components of the heating, the air conditioning, and the ventilation. This is part of that program. The flooring, especially on the second floor of the headquarters station, it desperately needs to be replaced. It's 20 years old. The underlayment is actually coming up. If you can see the waves in the floor, and it's time for that. The ambulance is part of the every other year replacement. We got caught up in a little bit of a situation with Ford that we no longer can get the E-Series, the van type chassis any longer. We went to a medium duty International chassis, and of course International has stopped making the motors for those. So we're almost coming full circle in a good way back to Ford. We're going to the F-Series, which looks like a pickup truck, and with that, after the fourth replacement, we'll start a program of rechassing. So the box of an ambulance won't last 6 years, it'll last 12 years. So once we get them all at this F-series, every other year they'll get a new get a whole new ambulance. But in that middle change, we keep the box and we put a new truck under it. So that's good news.
So just to be clear, you're not advocating having a pickup truck come to somebody's house and throw them in the back?
No, we're not.
It's still a full-service ambulance?
It's a full-service
As we
ambulance.
have come to
Just-
expect, right?
So those are the articles we have this year,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
All right. Let's move on.
And just to touch on that, one of the, as part of that, the Article 11, the $5,900 for the chest compression devices is, you actually remove $57,000 or $59,000 from the request, and we funded it through a grant, or we're trying to fund it through a grant. So, wherever we can, we tried to remove some things. We made a change in the capital plan for the engine next year, changed the size of it to take some money off of it, and also, what was the third thing? Oh, the radios. Yeah, doing some more research on the radios. We think, first of all, that we were able to take it off this year because it's not a critical for this year issue. Second of all, there's new equipment coming out that's probably going to be able to cut it in half.
Nice.
So it was worth the wait. And we're actually field testing, I should have it in my hands on Monday morning, the new radio to work with our current system.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's move on to the budget.
The budget, there really isn't a significant change in the budget. There were some minor things that we added. We requested 2 positions initially. In conversations with Chris, one position was pretty much immediately removed, and he was going to try and fund the second one. As things came to pass, that wasn't be able to. We had a conversation about it. We're on board with that as long as we can maintain our operating budget the way it is. We can continue to do what we do. With adding the 4th ambulance, with the increase in runs, we're up 7% this year. The people are starting to get stretched thin. I think that the chief mentioned in the beginning a little bit of change of thinking. We went to the day position several years ago as kind of a to address the peak problems, the peak problem hours. I think what we've come to pass is that the peak problem hours are 24 hours a day. We're busy 24 hours a day, or we need the manpower. We're at that level where the 6 people that are on duty, which is our minimum, are fully engaged 24 hours a day, or needed to be. So I think we'd rather look toward increasing by 2 and making the shifts larger so we can increase our shift minimum, which makes us more efficient. In the explanation document, when I talked about how we run, an ambulance call right now in the headquarters district, when we're at our shift minimum of 6, involves moving the other stations, taking somebody from station 2 and bringing them in here. It's not really an efficient way to run. It's how we need to run to keep the captain available to kind of manage the town.
Sure.
So,
So we could expect next year you'd be looking to put 2 new positions in, is that right?
I think
Is that your plan?
the request for next year would be 2 with the intent of putting 4 people on shifts, taking the existing day people, reassigning them to a group.
Understand.
And increasing the staff in 24/7.
Okay.
With that, we're going to look at, I don't know that there would be a significant overtime savings, and I don't want to throw a number out there because we haven't looked at it, but this is really more about efficiency at this point than necessarily a savings of overtime.
Okay.
Clearly, we can reduce the overtime down the road if we add more people. There comes a break point of which is the best way to go.
Yep, understand. Okay.
Just go through my notes real quick here. The significant increase in the budget for us, the majority of it is based on the economic adjustment, where that trickles into overtime, trickles into longevity, all those things. We did do a couple of things in the EMS section. We have monitors for checking carbon monoxide in people's blood. We're starting a maintenance program for those so that they're going to be calibrated and maintained every year. It's a service contract. A decontamination program for the ambulances. They come down twice a year. It's actually, for what they do, for very short money. The police use them for the lockup as well. They come down and completely decontaminate the ambulance to a professional standard twice a year. And there's a volume discount. They'll do all 4 ambulances at a cheaper price when they come down. So we added that in, and we're also replacing an external AED, the external defibrillator that is at end of life. The battery, they live so long, and then you just throw them out.
probably the biggest, and I'll let the chief talk about this, in our regional dispatch. There's a significant increase in the line item for that. It has to do with a lot of the changes that are going on at the sheriff's office with the regional communication center. If you want to.
I had the opportunity to meet with the sheriff and speak on behalf of the Barnstable County Fire Chiefs. At our quarterly meeting, we meet with him quarterly. All the customers do, 10 towns. And he presented a budget that was, we appreciated the budget that went out to FY20. We were a bit shocked when we found out that at the end of, 3 budget years out, that our costs are going to go from, 93,000 to 265,000. That's Harwich. Dennis is going up over 300,000.
Is that because he's losing grant funding or something, or?
He is the state. He's a state entity.
Yeah.
That is not it's not county. It's a state entity. He subsidizes the dispatch center at over $1 million subsidy from the state. His position is that the state auditors are going to question and tell him he can no longer provide that subsidy to the dispatch center. And quite frankly, I don't believe him. I'm not saying he's lying. I'm just saying he needs to provide the subsidy. And I made it very clear that his customer base is going to go from 10 to probably 2 if this program goes through. I explained to him in Harwich that we're presently doing a study to figure out where that break point is, where we're going to bring it back. And if he didn't take this piece of paper back and present something more palatable to the fire chiefs and to our bosses, the thing's going to go belly up. He listened. His special assistant, special sheriff listened, and we subsequently have re-met, and he has told us that he won't go above the estimated increases for next year. That's where he stands. It's more money, but it certainly is acceptable. And that doesn't mean that we're going to continue not to pressure him in our legislature to keep that subsidy for a regional. We all know the big word here is regional, regional, regional. This is a good deal for us right now. It's a really good deal. We don't deal with all the things that, unfortunately, Chief Gomet is dealing with his dispatch center. It's a good deal. But there's some politics going on here. And I don't really have a lot of patience for that.
But when it comes home to roost here, which is dollars, okay, at the same level of service.
When I sit before the administrator, I sit before the board, and you look at this, and you're going to say, Chief, what are you doing?
Right.
So we're hoping that the sting of that will lessen. I don't anticipate that he's going to go to the 60, the 80, and 100. It may go to the 40%. We're halfway there this year. So I anticipate an increase next year, but I don't see it dramatically going up from there on.
But keep us in the loop, because, if we need to, send correspondence or whatever, put pressure on some folks to get his subsidy or whatever it is, maintained or improved, let us know, because obviously it's a very important item to us.
Absolutely, absolutely. The other one line item that I'm sure you're gonna pick up on, because it went by percentages, was a 500% increase in one of the. It's a maintenance line item. It was a $20,000 some odd line item that we found working with the link at the highway. There are some things that come up every year that he does, but he didn't plan on. There are some repairs to. Technical repairs to the aerial, technical repairs to pumpers. He's gladly doing it. But he called me and he said, Chief, time out, you're out of money. Because he does it by department.
I understand.
So we felt it would be prudent to put in a $20,000 line item to catch those things that the DPW really didn't plan on doing. So that's why you'll see a huge increase in that one line item. And it will vary from year to year depending on what thing needs to be fixed outside the capacity of the DPW.
Is this one particular item that needs to be fixed, or is it a couple?
This year we have one. We're going to do some work on the ladder truck.
Okay.
An example of that, and it was when Charlie was the head of the vehicle maintenance, the forestry unit. When we repurposed the newer pickup, we made it back into a pickup and made the forestry. Charlie did that pretty much all out of his operating budget, and that would be the kind of thing we would pick up in this. Okay. That made sense for us, but wasn't part of the plan maybe initially.
Okay. All right. Anything else on the
No, I
budget?
think that's pretty much the highlights.
Okay, so this time we're gonna start down this end, so I don't unfairly point to people. Angelo?
Just a question. You show about $1.5 million in fees for next year, I believe.
Ambulance revenues around
Ambulance
$1.5 million.
Receipts, yes.
Yep, receipts.
Is that significantly higher than this year, or about the same?
You should have the sheet in front of you. The main impact on that, we all know, is Fontaine. The insurance money from Fontaine has been very good. As they get busier, that number's gonna go up. So I don't know how much more it's gonna go up, but I suspect it will.
And you're going to make this year's number?
We're on target to do very well with the ambulance receipts.
Yes.
What is this year's number?
We, this year, the billing receipts for 15 were 304, just from Fontaine. Versus 14, it was 199. That's just Fontaine, and that represented a 34% increase in runs to Fontaine.
Okay.
So and 15 was the first full year of Fontaine. 14
The
was.
reason I asked the question is that what's being carried for you is $1.275 this year. So if it's not, and you're showing $1.5 million for next year, so either there's something wrong with what's being carried this year, or you're jumping up a lot, so you might want to look at it.
Chris, you wanna jump in?
Just to respond to that, that number has been going up, and what we've been trying to do per the selectmen's policy is to kind of keep it about 90% of that number. So it's always going to be a little bit lower than the actual receipts because we have to have that margin. But we have been creeping that up as that revenue's coming in, and we're confident the revenue will continue to come in, which I think is really a key component. We have been creeping that up too.
So what is shown here on this document then is minus 10%?
It's basically minus 10%.
And with that, we're looking into a program, Yarmouth just did it with success twice, of recouping some of the lost Medicare money. It involves some more work by Coastal and some more paperwork to submit it. We missed this opportunity in October. We're gonna go for it again next year when it comes available. And, even if it's $20,000 or $30,000, it's a help, so.
I was just looking at the,
Yeah, we had identified, Town of Yarmouth, the finance director had brought it to my attention that the state has a fund that they've been contributing to, that whatever we lose every time we do an ambulance run on Medicare, Medicaid, that they have a fund that they're trying to make up some of that loss. But you actually have to apply, say how many Medicare, Medicaid runs you have, and then they will provide some supplemental dollars. It's quite a bit of a paperwork, so it's gonna be a little bit of an effort on our side and with the billing, but it's something worth pursuing if we mean additional.
So that's on an
money.
annual basis, you file the
Yes.
the
Yeah,
forms?
As long as the program exists, I mean, yes.
Understand. Okay. Angelo, you all set on that? Oh, Angelo, you set with that question?
Yep.
Michael? No question. Okay, thank you. Janelle?
I just have a logistics question. Why is dispatch separate for fire and police when you guys share the same facility?
Cost. We found a way of essentially outsourcing our dispatch to the sheriff, Sheriff Cummings Regional Dispatch Center. And that's why we did it, to save money.
But you couldn't share that same person that's in that booth? No?
Not with a call load, no.
Okay.
Linda?
Just kudos on working so closely with the DPW to get the maintenance stuff done and making the understanding and putting in the extra money.
I'll just say, I know Link just walked in, and I say it all the time. It's amazing what work comes out of the DPW, not just for the fire department, but for the entire town. When I go up there and I see them make a vehicle, the truck that does the chipper truck, I mean, I'm fascinated by the work that comes out of the DPW.
Wait till he gets that 3D printer and he can print the vehicle. It's gonna be.
Looking forward to it.
I'm set.
Okay, Dana?
Yeah, Chief, you were talking about how you're 24 hours busy now. What about seasonal changes? Are we seeing up and down in the summer, or seasonally, what's the situation?
We do have the statistics to show the change, but unlike when I came here 38 years ago, it doesn't, we're seeing a more consistent. It's much more different, maybe a different type of run, but the huge peaks during the summer months just aren't there. we're busier, make no doubt about that, but it's not that huge spike, and it's not that huge drop in come September.
I want to just mention that, Dave, you were talking about efficiency by adding the positions, but it's also an issue of life. And the research indicates that Station 2, if it's properly staffed, is going to save runtime, which could translate into lives. And it's an important topic, obviously. Thank you.
Every time we wait for that pickup truck to come out of Station 2 to meet this other ambulance, there's a delay. Yep.
Just a quick question. Has the mix of fire versus rescue changed year versus year, or is it about the same?
It's pretty much the same. There was a little spike with Fontaine for us. It's typically like 75, 80%, depending on, nationwide, if you look at it. And we held about 70%. We actually started to drop down a little bit. Fontaine kicked that back up. I don't have the exact split right now, but I think the last time I ran it, it was about 65 or 70%.
There's been a significant increase this year in electric vehicle fires over last year.
That was
I read.
described by dispatch as a small brush fire.
It was.
Ed?
It started that way.
Yeah. Ed?
I know the spike at Fontaine was when they went to an urgent care facility. I know there's a plan for a new health clinic. That urgent care is one of the things they are considering as one of the services to provide, and I'm wondering if you guys felt you could withstand another small spike.
Like Fontaine, we're not going to know until it happens.
Yeah.
We'll deal with it when it happens, and then we'll have a discussion, because we don't know. We go to Outer Cape now.
Yeah.
But like you said, Ed, is when they go to an urgent care, I don't believe we're going to see that huge spike like we did with Fontaine, because they're there. There is already one here.
Yeah.
Will there be more? Sure, there'll be more, but we don't know yet what the impact will be. There will be one, but we don't know what it'll be.
Okay. Larry?
No questions. Good job.
Noreen?
No questions, thank you.
Mr. Larios?
I have more of a comment than a question. Ed brought up Fontaine, and I think that's something that affects us greatly, and I don't know what their strategic plan is to grow. And the chief and I have had this discussion before. The town has always addressed the fire needs, and we've seen increases both in equipment needed and personnel as a standard at par. Bringing on something beyond par, calling it Fontaine Medical Center, has increased the demands on equipment and personnel. And I think we should be aware that working at par or working at the standards that we always have, we've seen increases, but we should be aware that this beyond par called Fontaine is going to have more demands in terms of people, personnel, overtime, and equipment from the capital expenditure standpoint. And I just think that the chief and the deputy chief have done a fine job, but I would ask them to track and to interface with Fontaine so that we understand spikes in terms of their strategic plan and how it's going to affect us beyond our regular standard request of we need more personnel and more equipment, running it without Fontaine, and then you add Fontaine on, and then you get this delta that's even greater, and just an awareness standpoint.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Oh, Linda.
Where are you? I know that there's a task force that has been organized to study the East Harwich Station 2.
Yes.
Could you give us a quick update as to where you are in your process? And
Certainly. Under the capital plan, there was money for plans, $50,000 next year, and I believe in 2 years we had earmarked a $4 million rehab of Station 2. Through the administrator, a working group was put together. I'm on that committee. We have some civilians on the committee, and in fact, Tuesday morning, we have a meeting to brief the administrator to hopefully push this forward to a formal committee. Working with the facility manager at the DPW, we've identified the issues at Station 2. Going to be a long story short, we're looking at the $4 million. We believe looking at the costs of other stations in the area. We used a $480 per square foot, which is outrageous cost to do things, but those are the numbers. And sure enough, that number that we told the capital is a good number. With that, we hope to put a second floor on Station 2 and add another bay. And that's essentially where we're at.
Thank you.
Just to that, with the addition of the 4th ambulance, we're putting a vehicle outside now at Station 2, you know, when that goes into service this year. So it's kind of hit critical mass. We're out of garage at Station 2, and headquarters is full also. So it's a needed thing.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Ed?
As you look at Station 2, have you done any interfacing with our neighboring communities? Because I know it is suited for mutual aid responses in at least 2, if not 3, of our neighboring communities.
We have. That was one of the very first things I did. I reached out to Chief in Briscoe and Chatham, not interested. I reached out to Chief Moran in Brewster. He's not interested in sharing Station 2. His comment was, if we're going to share Station 2, why don't we make it one fire department? I said, that's a good idea, but that's a little more than I can take on right at the moment. That's the direction. So he's not interested. Chief Pike in Orleans, there's not a real effect, a positive of sharing that station with the town of Orleans. Chatham is crucial. Brewster is crucial. And I would agree with Chief Moran, if we start to look at sharing services at Station 2 or a regional station at Station 2, we're going to make it one fire department. Then that's where we'll see the efficiencies and the savings, especially in administration.
Well, there's the issue of sharing, but there's just also the issue of understanding their needs so that we're not, you know, doing something that handicaps our ability to be an adequate, you know, a good partner in mutual response. And just so
we have very good working auto response areas now. We don't, as far as the fire departments go, especially in this part of the Cape, there are no town lines.
Yeah.
There's circles on a map. We do that now, and essentially we're doing that now without a huge expense. We're using existing equipment, existing people, and helping each other out. We do it on a daily basis.
So Chief and Deputy, I just wanted, as we did with the police department, I just want to express these boards thanks and appreciation for the service you folks provide, and certainly for the citizens of town of Harwich. You guys do a great job, men and women. I should say that, but keep it up. And Dave, you did exceed our expectations, so kudos. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And now we get to DPW, so. And by the way, feel free to wander around whatever that you need to. I mean, it's, I'm still here, yeah. Well, let's see, the head person has always been on this side. You can break the tradition. I mean, it's whatever you want, Link.
You know, you go into battle, you look behind you, and
There's no one there.
no one there.
Well, no, he's far back. He's way back.
Be smart, Link.
We'll just give folks a second. Get back in. I don't think it's getting any warmer in here.
No, I don't think it's, I'm freezing.
I didn't bring my mittens.
I see the
My gloves this time.
age.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, Sean, how come the heat's not working in this building? Saturday setback, there you go, that's a good phrase, Saturday setback.
Setback to 60 degrees.
Can we manually override it?
Already done.
I don't feel the effect yet.
I called him at 8:30. I know you're coming, but
Takes 2 hours.
A well-oiled machine here this morning.
Oh, except to tell somebody that needs to go there that they can't go there, because, you know, yeah.
It's probably part of their business plan.
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay, good morning, how are you?
I'm well. It's early on a Saturday morning.
Did you bring any mailboxes with you today?
Plenty of mailboxes around town.
Okay, all right, no snow today. So look, if you haven't noticed from the previous presentation, we'll switch it up a little bit, in that this year we're asking you to quickly go through your articles first, and then we'll jump into the budget, okay? Historically, we've always not have enough time for the articles, et cetera, so we thought we'd tackle those initially, and then move on to the budget, okay? So welcome.
Despite me being young, I've been told the reading glasses I usually use when I'm reading something. But from my wife watching Channel 18 on occasion, she says it's very distracting when I'm like this and taking them off all the time. So I'm going to put
Could
them
go
on.
like this, you know?
And hopefully remain this way.
All right.
All right. The first article. Good evening, Link Hooper, DPW Director. I have Kim Berube, Administrative Assistants, the brains behind the operation. And Sean Libby.
We know that, by the way.
Facilities.
Yeah.
The brains and the beauty.
Thank you.
Okay.
And Sean Libby, Facilities Maintenance Manager. It's been with us now, 2 years, I believe. Made a remarkable impact. The first article I've been asked to talk about was snow and ice. Currently, we've spent $321,000 to date. We are in deficit of $186,000. The vast majority of that money comes from $152,000 in materials, which is primarily salt. As has been my practice the last couple of years, we wait until the salt bid is open, which is a Plymouth County salt bid, and there is about a month time where we know what the cost of the upcoming year is. We purchased it under last year's price. There was a price increase of, I believe, around $6 a ton. I talked to the administrator, got his consent to purchase, I think, about 1,500 tons to fill our salt barn, saving the town about $10,000. It doesn't go bad. There's not a shelf life on it. Typically, we try to end the season with an empty salt barn, but right now it's on the full side. Anticipating last year, and it hasn't materialized.
And obviously, you can't control when it snows and all those good things, so.
Be happy not to deploy resources if the board wants to sign on it. Were we just going through these questions?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll tell you if it's no good, you know.
The middle school maintenance, Article 12, get to that. I believe that is just to paying utilities, the septic expense, and other items that are associated with maintaining that school being open. The transfer station roof is not just the roof. That's the roof, the siding, the gutters, the entire shell of the building. That building was constructed in 1988. I believe that would be 28 years old or close to that. Last year, we spent $250,000 rehabbing the internal structure of the facility, doing the push pit, the compactor, the power unit. This puts the final cap on finishing off that building for probably another 30 years or close to it. The road maintenance program, every year, we shoot for about $1.4 million in total maintenance. We typically have been receiving about $700,000 in Chapter 90. We try to augment that with about $700,000 of local money each year. I'm extremely proud of the conditions of the roads in Harwich, despite there being some potholes that have materialized we're trying to get to. And I believe the conditions, why we are better than our neighbors in most of the roads you find, is the support that I've received from both of these boards, the job that Chris Nickerson does in maintaining and managing those roads and maintaining the infrastructure. The $700,000 request is more than last year. Last year, we knew the state had augmented Chapter 90 by another $100 million. We received about $300, plus we had $100,000 in pothole money, $103,000 pothole money. So we still had the $1.4 million mark last year. That's what we try to maintain for consistency's sake. The 5-year road management plan is available on our website in detail. Vehicles. I think there's a plethora of them.
Plethora.
Road maintenance. We're replacing a 1999 Ford one-ton dump truck. These are the workhorses of the DPW. Moves snow, ice for sanding, moves people around, pulls trailers. This one happens to have 136,000 miles on it, and is 1999. The Mack tractor is for the disposal area, where that is replacing a 1998 Mack tractor with, it says $500,000, at 600,000 miles on it. And we've been starting to spend some money at it. We replaced one last year. We have a pair of them. This would be the second in replacement of that. An MSW trailer, that is simply to haul the town's municipal solid waste off Cape, as is our practice. We've always had 3. With the new contract we signed, the hours that we had for delivery had contracted significantly to about half of what was particularly available. It made it a nightmare last summer trying to manage a solid waste for Mr. Kiernan, our disposal area manager. Typically, prior to that, we were doing business with Cavanta or CMAS. Their hours were 5:30 in the morning to 6:30 at night, 6 days a week. You view MSW as a just-in-time type of inventory. When it's full, you can pull it no matter what the time. It's no longer the case. We need this additional trailer to help manage that function. The Barber surf rake, last year, we knew this surf rake was getting tired. It's 10 years old. It's done a wonderful job. I'd be remiss if I didn't say thank you to Dave Rydington, who makes that beach look like it's down in Florida somewhere. Very manicured. He does a wonderful job. We were talking about replacing that surf rake this coming, next year, I'm sorry. We used it, broke it out. We knew it was getting tired. The vehicle maintenance manager came in and talked to me and said, we need to do something about it. Let's get the season out of it, was my reaction to him. Unfortunately, the first week out, it broke. Now, the company that sells the surf rake was gracious enough to lend us the exact same, lease us the exact same machine, and they have agreed to apply those lease payments, which I believe was $13,500, towards the purchase price, plus our trade-in, and it's $31,500 for the rake. It's a $65,000 machine to buy it off the street. So I hope that is approved. That is an extremely important piece of equipment. Then we have the equipment articles. The first 3 items here are very small equipment. It's a gated utility vehicle, which I believe is, a 99. It's very old. It's the little machine you see moving materials on the ball fields. We've had to put good money in a bad machine. It was supposed to be replaced actually almost 2 years ago, and it fell through the cracks. It's desperately needed. And it's used every day at the ball fields. And as Chief Clark alluded to, this is no longer a seasonal type environment we have here. As soon as the snow melts, we've got people wanting to utilize the fields. I mean, it's that, and it's right till late fall. So it's 7-8 months out of the year that we're maintaining ball fields. Second is a Walker mower for $13,000. That's one of the mowers that goes around and does town buildings and cemeteries and so forth. 2 John Deere ride-on mowers. Those are the mowers that maintain the sides of the road. You might have seen 2 of them out. You only get 5-6 years out of those, and John Deere's are the best. We found to be the most heavy-duty machines. It's a tough environment. The high-track skid steer for $65,000. This is an addition to one we already have. There's nothing wrong with the one we have, but we use the one we have constantly, not only for grading and loading materials. We use it for stump grinding. We use it for brush cutting. We loan it to the water department. There's a waiting list to get this piece of equipment. I think we could better serve the town if we had a second high-track skid steer. So that is in addition to what we have. We would be trading a small skid steer older style, smaller wheel loader that really has no utility these days. The last item on the equipment's a certified articulate lift. This is $80,000 for a used piece of equipment. I believe they're in excess of $150,000 new. This is from Sean. Sean has requested this piece of equipment. They cost $700 or $800 a day to rent. There's usually a waiting line to get a hold of them. Sean felt that we could better serve the community and he could better do more things in-house if we had our own lift. And it would certainly be used in other departments and other places around town. And that is I want to emphasize, that's a used piece of equipment, that target of $80,000 is what his research indicated would be needed to try to go after that piece of equipment. I believe that concludes my articles.
All right, let's go to the budget.
Wow.
See how easy this is? That's because you guys did such a great job putting it together, see?
Thank you, Kim.
Well, I wasn't talking to you, Link. It's some of these two.
My mistake, Mr. Chair. You have the packet I emailed. Everybody has the packet that I emailed out to them?
I believe, yes.
Okay. The first thing was, what are the differences? So you're really asking for a variance analysis. I want to make clear that we're establishing centralized vehicle maintenance, strike me, that was 8 years ago. Centralized building maintenance, facility maintenance. It's been a goal of the Board of Selectmen. We finally have a man to lead that organization. And there's $173,209 added to a new line item or an unused line item in our budget, 5290, other property-related services, where the administrator and the accountant had moved monies from other departments' budgets with jurisdictions over buildings into that line item to consolidate it and give Sean some autonomy and hopefully save some money in the long run. I did not include that in the presentation materials that were due a couple Fridays ago for this meeting, because that was still in flux. Those numbers were still changing. They weren't definitive, and it would have skewed the entire budget presentation, looking like there's another $173,000 there.
So you're telling us you're basically, accounting-wise, pulling them from other departments that had them tagged as or identified as being maintenance-related for those particular departments and bringing some in-house where it makes sense. So the net is about the same, right?
Yeah, let me take a second and talk about that. Sean met with all the departments that had jurisdictions over buildings. I believe a couple days ago there were some questions between some board members and the administrator, and I emailed out the working spreadsheet that was utilized to derive this one number that was in front of you folks. Basically, it's just a spreadsheet where we looked at each line item and sub-items within each line item to determine what made sense to centralize and what made sense to leave in those departments' budgets. I believe that was complete agreement with the department heads that Sean met with to do that, and then those monies were transferred into the DPW budget. It was a long, laborious task, and credits goes to Sean for sticking with it and getting it done. If we could go to page 2 on my presentation materials, total budget summary. In total, salary and wage and expenses, our budget is up $293,000, or roughly 7% over last year. The vast majority of that comes in the form of increased disposal area costs. That is increased tip rates on both our C&D and our MSW. We have a 2.5% escalator in the 10-year contract the board signed, I believe, a year and a half ago. This is the first year we've been experienced to that escalator. Also, business has been great. Disposal area, I always look at trash as a leading economic indicator, and I've got to tell you, at least town of Harwich and Cape Cod's been doing gangbusters. I mean, I'm seeing numbers that are prior to the 2008 recession is where we're back at. Numbers that have surprised me, even. If we could go to page 3, that summarizes the expenses in the DPW. And you can see that if we remove the solid waste, which is 5380, those increases, our budget actually decreased by nearly $33,000. I'd like to be able to take credit for that. However, that is primarily a result of the county bidding our fuel, bulk fuel early this year. Elaine Davis, county purchasing agent, saw that the numbers were significantly down a little less than $1, I think 80 cents, 90 cents prior, and she bid it several months early. And you can see all right now with this meeting that the cost of oil has gone up somewhat. Her timing was remarkable. That resulted in a $33,000 savings for the DPW budget. If that, and that would have been a $32,000 reduction if it was not for the increase in solid waste. The increase in solid waste accounted for $164,000 of the budget increase. That nets out at $164,000 total. Our revenue, we beat revenue projections in 15 by $359,000. I'd like to make clear that does not come without some challenges in that the town administrator had to find some money to help augment the DPW budget, which was short because of the increased tonnage. Quite frankly, it comes down to guessing. I've done pretty good up until the last 2 years when, for several reasons, our volume has increased, and I've underestimated what that volume would be. I think this year's budget would set that pretty much on par. Page 4, salary and wage summary. Our salary and wages are up a little 7.11%. The major, most of that is contractual, or $90,000 of that's contractual. There is a plumber in here to help Mr. Libby manage facilities maintenance a little more efficiently. The cost of the plumber was $62,000. There was 2 small reclassifications you can see there, one for myself and one for Brian Albee, that made increases outside of contractual of $71,000. You guys can chime in anytime you want.
Doing great. Moral support.
Great job. I feel the love.
It's coming, don't worry.
Page 5 of this is essentially the entire DPW expense budget, and it's really a variance analysis. The change in the middle shows where the pluses and minuses occurred within the budget. I'd like to point out down at the bottom, capital expenditures, 5850. We were instructed in the beginning of the process to put small equipment. Some of those things I already discussed in the budget. Mr. Clark had to remove those capital expenditures from the budget when he was having difficulty presenting a balanced budget, when the numbers got tighter. Oh, I have page 6 is, again, a variance analysis of this, of the salary and wage by the various departments within the DPW. Some of the, down at the bottom, some of the overtime distribution looks off, like there was some significant increases. That is due to the fact that the on-call, used to call it on-call beeper, it's really not a beeper any longer. Our on-call staff member used to simply be a highway, either Chris Nickerson or Walter Stratton, a highway manager or road manager. The vast majority of those calls, particularly during the summer season, was coming to Mr. Libby, or who else did we split that up? Oh, with Rich Berube, who manages our parks. The vast majority of those are water's running at a restroom, something to do with the beaches. It has really nothing to do with Walter or Chris, and everything to do with Bob and with Boo and Sean. So it made that to be more equitable in that split between 4 departments. But when you have a department with 2 or 3 people, it looks like a huge increase, percentage-wise. I believe page 7, the last one, is a staffing comparison from 1995 through the current fiscal year. I wanted to draw attention to the first column, the highway full-time staff members. We have, Walter is actually a person below where he was in 1995. We had shored that function up prior to 2005. We had the override. We lost 6 people out of the DPW, with, I believe, 5 of them coming from highway. We've never been able to rebuild that function. We have added vehicle maintenance. We have added custodial services. We've added one to facility maintenance, and building maintenance. I'm talking FTEs that we've added. We have never done anything for the highway, and yet the demands have increased. The only way we keep our head above water is all of these separate departments within the DPW function as a whole, as a real united team, and we allocate resources where they're needed at the time. One function that jumps to the top of the list is we're unable, with Walter staffing, to keep the catch basin cleaning, which we have a catch basin clamshell machine or truck that we get a couple hundred basins a year. In perspective, we probably have 4,000 basins in town. We get to the problem child and whatever we can hit. Another full-time body would help him be able to keep that function going more often. You look at 8, right off the bat, we lose 2 to street sweeping for nearly half a year. We use 1 to David Wrightington to cleaning the beaches, and that's no longer isolated to like Memorial Day through Labor Day. I mean, we start that in April, and you don't end it until after Cranberry Fest, and we're still picking up beaches until, what, October, I think. So I know there's no money in the budget this year. I wanted to provide that to demonstrate that the highway is really understaffed, in my opinion. And I believe that concludes my formal presentation.
Okay, thank you. So
Now the fun starts.
Chris, did you have a comment?
Yeah, just before we move on, Article 12 is kind of all related to various buildings, and while Sean's here, if there are any questions in regards to that, there are other areas that, $29,000 for the library smoke and heat detector, as well as the fire sprinkler at the library at $15,000, and then we had also $5,000 for internal and external painting throughout. Those items will come under Mr. Libby, so if there's any questions, probably fair to ask Sean than to wait for the library people to show up.
Okay, all right. I'm gonna start down this end this time, Kendall, so you'll be laughing. Keep swapping back and forth, okay? So,
You're writing this down?
oh, I have arrows. See, these, I have arrows. See, I'm making arrows that way or this way. So, Rich, we'll start down there.
I'm good.
Okay, Noreen,
Just one.
use the mic.
Thank you for this information, as always, excellent. You know, I just note that you have, in your salaries linked, have separated by categories, and one is cemetery salaries. But also on page 19 in the summary budget, it looks like a new position for cemetery. So I don't know if this is appropriate for Link's question or for somebody else. Somebody could just explain
Good.
that to me.
I believe that's a cemetery administrator.
Right.
That is admitted for that. She has her own budget. We work very closely together. She works out of the DPW. We perform all the maintenance functions for that. I believe that request was something to do with her pet crematory or pet cemetery or something like that.
Linda.
I think if you look on, Chris, might be a Munis question, because if you look at the Munis budget that we were given, the cemetery administrator's salary and wages 2015 is 0, 2016 budget is 0, but miraculously shows up in 2017. I think and I know she's been working for longer than this year.
Yeah.
So hopefully it wasn't for free. So somewhere,
It's a
is it somewhere else?
Yeah, good, Andy.
Mr. Chairman, I think what happened was Robin was part-time, so her salary was in the part-time line item, and then she became full-time, so it's on a separate line item now. I think that's what caused the problem.
So could you just let us know where it was last year and in 2015?
Yeah, where
Like
it was
what
in and where it
line
got
item?
moved to.
Lake, when did she go full-time?
It was last year, this current fiscal year, 16.
I believe her hours, she's been working 30, I believe, and she was increased to 35 last year,
30 to 35 last year, at this current fiscal year.
All right, but let's let us know what it was in,
Yeah,
what
what-
account it was in before and what it moved to.
Well, it went from line 5118 to 5119, part-time to full-time.
Doesn't show up in the,
Eight's not on here.
right, it's not on here.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm looking at a different report.
Page 19.
Okay.
In case I get any questions.
Thank you.
Ernie, did that take care of it?
Yeah.
I can
Larry?
see.
Link, good job as always. I was curious by your comment about buying a new truck because of the move away from CMAS. In some ways, that's an increased expense over, we did all this financial analysis when we moved away. Are there other expenses that you've had to increase due to the move away from CMAS?
I guess his question is ABC or whatever it is still a great deal compared to what we thought we were gonna get with CMAS?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes. As you may recall, we saved $10 a ton on the MSW signing with ABC versus what the deal at the time with Cavanta was on. The lowest we signed at $55 a ton at the time. I believe the lowest town I've seen was $60 a ton.
So if you take into the expense of this, it's still a good deal.
Mr. Ballantyne, replacing the truck was in our schedule and in our plan long before we knew where we'd be going. There's no additional, the distances we're hauling, actually the new facility that's under construction is right across the street from CMAS. So there's no
But
real-
like, I think the confusion is it sounded like because of the hours of operation that it was affecting you.
Yeah,
So-
we have asked for a trailer, which I believe is around $70,000. That is a direct result of not having the hours available to us. The truck is
And that's my
not.
question, did that make it, it's still a good deal, to
I-
use Peter's language, sorry, I'm using the phone. You didn't yell at me, Peter.
I can't do everything, but almost.
Okay.
I probably would not have, had we not had the experience, the negative logistics experience last summer, I probably wouldn't have been seeking an additional trailer.
Might be good just to verify the expenses, from the move, so we understand that better.
I'd like to put this in perspective, if I may. Brewster, that does probably a third of the volume we do, had 6 trailers. Okay? When they opened their facility, Dennis had 7 trailers. Okay? We only, we inherited 3, that's what we stuck with, that's what we were able to manage up until this change last year. So we still, even with 4 trailers, it's less than what our neighbors have for the same function. But we do need this trailer as a direct result of
Yeah,
changing.
and
the
that's just what I'm trying to understand, is all the expenses related, is it still, if I may, a second question?
I guess, yeah.
Regarding the lift that you're buying, I know what, we've had some success in the golf course as an example where they shared, I think, with Brewster, it might be Yarmouth, buying a aerator because they only used it occasionally. Are there opportunities in some of the equipment you use to work with other towns to jointly buy an equipment, that equipment that you don't use very often?
I'll say that we do swap equipment with other towns. What comes to mind is we borrow a screener from the town of Dennis and Yarmouth. They actually have the screener, don't have means to move it readily without hiring somebody. We have means to move it. We do that. As far as the lift, I'd like to defer to Mr. Libby, if I may.
And let me comment, this is just a general question.
Actually, I've looked into some of the other towns. They do not have the, any lifts of this type, articulating lifts that would lift us up to the roofs that we need to get to. I know that Charlene brought to my attention that Truro has a lift that's used between, Truro, you said P-Town borrows it. And that it becomes a scheduling issue if we need to get it to do a repair from that end of the Cape is a little bit more difficult, but locally they don't have anything that would lift, especially to the fire department and the police station's roof to do their systems that they have there for their ventilators. We can't get to them without renting.
So once we have this lift, then we could, other towns could take advantage of it, I guess.
Oh,
If it
absolutely.
made sense for you guys.
And the lift is important for, for safety aspects, getting up, and also so we can get to, areas that haven't been touched for maintenance.
And I agree with all that, I was just.
Okay, we gotta move on. Ed?
Just a quick question on the increase in the C&D cost of disposal. Is that primarily due to increased tonnage or an increased fee?
Yes. No, it's primarily,
Half and half?
we went from $70 a ton, and you may recall when we signed on a dotted line with ABC, we were paying $75. To sweeten the deal, they cut that by $5 a ton. At the time, we were doing around 5,000 tons a year. So that's a $25,000 savings on an annual basis. We're doing in excess of 6,000 tons now. So it's an important function. We are paying now 71 and change. The escalator just went into effect this January 1st. We charge $125 at the gate. It's about $10 a ton to handle and haul. It's a pretty good model and provides an important service, as you're aware.
Okay. Mark?
And for the audience at home, what things can people do to recycle more to help us save money and stuff like that?
Next question? No, I'm sorry. I went to the county, the Solid Waste Advisory Committee, along with Barnstable County, put on a forum 4 or 5 months ago. Recycling rates are in the tubes. The business student in me says do nothing, because recycling actually is a loser. It's socially responsible. We're obligated under waistband items to do so. In good markets, we've turned in a high of $160,000, $170,000 in revenue. We're in a very down market at the time, and at the symposium we went to, the various vendors say that there's no end in sight to the current depressed recycling market.
Okay. Jack?
Through you, Mr. Chairman. Chris, on Article 19, I think a logical question is, why isn't that just an ordinary budget item rather than an article? Road maintenance program? I mean, we maintain the roads all the time, every year, year after year, and it just seems, I don't quite understand why the article versus the budget.
Yeah, this is one where, you know, I inherit certain things when I start, and what was kind of explained to me is that there's been a past practice in the community that if we need $1.4 million as the target amount, and Chapter 90 covers about $700,000, how do you make up that difference? So obviously, in this case, it's $700,000. In the time that I've been here, each year I've been here, I've recommended it as a capital exclusion. So I've done what has been done historically, or debt exclusion, I'm sorry.
So it's more of a pragmatic issue?
It's more of a pragmatic issue in my mind.
Okay.
Dana?
Thank you. Thank you, Ling.
Even though we haven't got to spring yet, I get all the complaints as you do about plow damage and so forth. Yeah, it's true. Have you started the repair program yet, or is that ongoing, or do you have a certain time when so people asking about fences and things? If you could just address that, please.
Mr. Chair, we inspect things as they occur, or as the snow melts and we're able to visually. We put them in a list, and when we're sure we're done plowing, we go out and begin repairs.
So you haven't started yet, is my point.
On egregious issues, we may make some, but typically we like to do this as a whole function, replace whatever we're going to replace, do the turf, and so forth when we know we are done plowing for the season.
Okay. Angela, I'm going to jump on there because you initially had the first hand up, and I avoided you because we started the other way. So we're going to run out of time here. So.
Okay. Actually, I have a question about Article 12, and it's something that also I think Jack brought up. Everybody keeps on referring into it about being a building, or article for buildings. I never knew that dredging was a building, so I have no idea why dredging is there. I also know that there's been conversation about putting that in the budget also, and I don't know why it's not in the budget. And the other question I have is, when you mentioned Article 12, it says dredging on it.
Doesn't on ours.
Was it pulled out?
Yeah, one of the things we did over the last week was to do a reconciliation and make sure that everything that was in the budget plan made it into the warrant. And what we realized was that we did not provide for dredging anywhere. So we put dredging in there. The idea behind that would be that it would still fall under the harbor master in terms of the 150,000. So it's a place where we've decided that we're going to fund certain things in the capital plan out of free cash, so that's why we parked it in 12, is because we didn't have any other better vehicle at the moment.
This isn't free cash?
The second, it is free cash.
12 is free cash?
Yes.
Okay.
And the second part of your comment is, you know, it has been funded, I think it's been funded out of capital exclusion for 2 years, that I funded out of capital exclusion 2 years ago. It was my intent to hopefully try to incorporate it into the budget. It didn't seem like the numbers were going to work this year to incorporate it into the budget, so I put it in for free cash because free cash was a little bit higher this year. I certainly agree that we do need to incorporate that into the operating budget as we move forward. This just was not the year to try to accomplish that.
And the second part of that question is the beach plowing, or plowing, or cleaning of the beach, I'm sorry. Should, they're not here, but should we collect a pile of fees for that? Should we increase our fees? Should that be paid for? If that's going to save some money for you? I mean, it's about time that we started using.
And that's a policy question
Yeah, that's
for
you guys.
these, yeah, that's for us to consider at some point in time.
Yeah,
It's a
recreation will be in
financial
this
question.
afternoon, so it's a question for
It's a
them.
financial
No,
question.
I understand.
That's what
Yeah.
it is.
I understand.
Source of funds.
Okay, Michael? Janelle?
All set.
Okay, Linda?
Just a quick question, Chris. Middle school maintenance is in this Article 12. Was that in the budget last year, and it was therefore pulled out and put into the, into free cash?
Yes. Yes, it was taken out, it was in the budget last year, it was taken out and was put into free cash for this year.
Any particular reason? Because we worked last year to put it into the budget.
That's
Because
correct.
the year before it was in free cash, because it was, we just had the building. We worked last year to put it back into the budget where it belongs, and now it's pulled out again? So
Yeah,
the answer
that-
is yes.
That's correct. It was pulled out and put back in. One thing, just in terms of that, thinking a little bit about it, in the first year we did it, it was recommended that we had it as, I think we did fund it out of free cash in the first year I was here. What that does when you fund in an article allows you to extend out beyond that year. And by having it in the budget this past year, if we're not going to, this current year, if we're not going to use it all, then it will revert to free cash and we lose it. So in some ways, having it back into free cash, if we don't spend the full amount, the 125, it does continue and becomes continually usable for us until it gets exhausted. So there is a little bit of an advantage to doing it out of free cash.
Okay, anything else? You good?
No, but that's fine.
No, is that your last question? Okay. All right, thank you, and again, you know, we've said this to other folks, but certainly the impact your team has on the town is everything. I mean, everywhere we go, whether it's roads, whether it's the, you know, the parks, whether it's the, you know, whether it's the beach, you know, maintenance of buildings, et cetera, you have an impact on everything. And I think in general, the comment I get from people, you know, you should see the roads in Chatham, or you should see the roads in Dennis, or, you know, whether it's snowing or not snowing or whatever. People, I think, definitely appreciate the fact that you folks are giving us terrific value for our money, so. And then at the recycling area, I know you don't, you know, I understand the economic part of the recycling, but it's a tremendous thing that this town does, quite frankly, and it's amazing in my little view of it, how many people take advantage of that. So I think, you know, everything you're doing is, I'll just say, a well-run, first-class operation. So, and I know you don't want the credit, so I give it to your people. So, yeah, Linda.
Just one comment. Thank you very much for the detailed analysis on the change in the maintenance. Made it very easy to follow as to what came and went and what was staying, so I really appreciate that.
Okay, so with that,
I may very briefly, on the recycling, I did not mean to slight it
I know. I know.
Okay, I would like to say this, the towns that had converted to single stream are in trouble right now. We've kept our product source separated. We have a high quality product because of the efforts of the residents here, so it's still marketable. Places are now, where they used to be a zero or a slight rent, are paying because somebody ultimately has to sort all those products.
I understand. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, well, we're trying to. All right, no. All right, so we're 4 minutes behind schedule, so come on, you gotta,
My fault, I take full
I know, what can I say?
We'll get it to you, too.
Multimedia.
So next up is Harbors and Waterway. Harbor Master John Rendon is here, and Matt Hart is here from Waterways.
Might need Lincoln's glasses.
So gentlemen, I don't know if you were here for the previous presentations, but we changed things up a little bit in that we want you to go through your articles first briefly, and then move on to the budget, so we make sure that you have the chance to talk about your articles. Welcome, by the way. And make sure you use the microphone when you want to speak.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Matt Hart, Chairman of the Harwich Waterways Committee. Thank you.
Good morning, John Rendon, Harbor Master, and I'll start with the articles. Thanks for listening here to me. I'll start with my top priority article, which is the reconstruction of the Saquotucket Municipal Marina.
Which, by the way, I think I read in the newspaper you got a grant, or we got a grant the other day.
We did, yes, sir.
Which is good news.
Very pleased. I'll try to, I have some notes that I think are important to hear, so I'll go through them. I'll try to go as quickly as I can. The existing docks, over 30 years old and well beyond their useful life. Wood decking framing is worn and splintered. The connecting hardware is bent, rusted, and causing tripping hazards where the docks join each other. The flotation is saturated and deteriorated. Fire suppression system doesn't work. The bubbler system is ineffective. The plumbing is old, and really the electrical issues are severe. Just last weekend, we lost our main line going from the road to our junction box that provides power throughout that facility. Eversource was there all day long changing out the three-phase thick wiring, and when they tried to pull the old, it was so brittle and so worn they had to take it out in pieces. So it's significant. We have severe shoaling inside the harbor, mostly along the north bulkhead, where there's periods of time during the summer when our boats that are moored there are sitting on the bottom during low tide. We have no handicap accessibility right now at the harbor, and it's significant. Right now, the positioning of three of our 4 passenger boats are at the end of the east dock. And what's that mean? It means that the hundreds of people that walk our docks to get out to the ferry and 2 of the other passenger boats have to walk a significant distance on those unstable docks to get there. And it's an issue. You think about it. We have an 80-passenger ferry that operates 3 times a day. We have a 60-passenger charter fishing boat that does 2 trips a day, a 42-passenger fishing charter that's geared towards young kids that does 3 trips a day, and we have a 40-passenger seal wildlife boat that does 3 passengers a day. That's a lot of people walking our docks every day during the summer. The scope of the project is to replace all the 191 slips that we currently have. That includes the finger docks, the main docks, and the piles, and replace the associated services such as lighting, electrical, plumbing, etc. Also, a big part of the project is the construction of a handicap accessible ramp system. This system will be in compliance with American with Disabilities Act and the Massachusetts Architectural Access Board, where we have a various ramp system that meets the loading platform for each of our 4 passenger boats that are over 40 feet in length. And then a significant portion of the project is dredging. Dredging anywhere between 12 to 15,000 cubic yards of material. From an engineering standpoint, last year, as you know, we received $500,000 for the engineering design through town meeting. Bourne Engineering was selected through a competitive bid process. They came in well under budget at $322,000. And so the permitting and the engineering design is well underway, and we'll kind of show you a little bit about what the design looks like. The board shows quickly just the preferred design that we're looking at. Just to highlight a couple things, the main walkways, which are the east and west docks, and the main dock along the bulkhead, those are going to be 8 feet wide instead of the 6 that we currently have. They're going to be constructed of concrete for max stability. All the finger docks coming off of those main docks will likely be tropical hardwood, a mix of concrete, which is max stability, very little maintenance, combined with some tropical hardwood. I think will keep the character and beauty. It won't look too commercialized, and yet we'll get the stability that we're looking for. We have a reduction in what we call Mediterranean-style slips. We have a lot of those currently, and that means that boats that tie their lines to piles only and don't have finger docks. They're not real popular, so we're reducing the number of those only to the commercial fishermen who that works well for them. We also will have 5 designated handicap accessible slips, again, in compliance with ADA requirements. We're adding a 50-foot category. Obviously, I have to present it before the Board of Selectmen, and I will do so to do that because it will be a whole different slip category. It'll address some of the larger boats that we have. They'll pay the appropriate rate, a higher rate, to have more room to tie their boats up. And this design creates an additional 11 slips. So we'll have a total of 202 boat slips, which of course is increased revenue. So I think we're really taking advantage of the footprint that we currently have. Quickly on cost, as Mr. Chairman indicated, in September I applied for a Seaport Economic Council grant. Just this week we found out that the town hasn't been awarded the max amount that's allowed, which is $1 million. And that grant application was really geared towards the East Dock section of the project, which is really the commercial piece of it, where our commercial fishermen are tied up, where our passenger boats are tied up, where our charter boats are tied up. So that was great news. I'd just like to highlight one thing while I'm on the grant. We've done, over the last several years, we've done some pretty significant projects from a harbor infrastructure perspective. Last year we replaced Witchmere Pier, commercial pier, and all the bulkheads and all the public floats, and the gangway going down to our public floats, which is handicap accessible. We did that with majority of which came from a Seaport Advisory Council grant worth $1.2 million. Our cost share was a little over $400,000, which was paid for through harbor revenue. We are in the last final phase of updating Allen Harbor. We replaced the bulkhead, the fixed pier, the platform going down to our docks with a handicap, again, accessible ramp system, the revetment wall on the south end of the parking lot, and we're getting the last piece of it is to regrade that parking lot. Again, 62% of that project was funded through a fishing and boating access grant. Our cost share was funded through free cash, $250,000 for the bulkhead piece of it. So I think you know we've really worked hard to try to minimize the impact on the taxpayer. Regarding cost, I put in the plan. You probably saw a funding business plan that I put together, and I guess I'd like to focus on Table 5 of that plan. It really talks about my recommendation on how we would fund the remaining $6 million. The total project estimated cost was $7 million. We got $1 million grant, so we have essentially a $6 million balance. And so I'm hoping that a large portion of that can be funded through harbor revenue that we currently have, new revenue that we'll be generating as a result of this upgrade. And if I can just quickly go through Table 5, I think everybody has that.
And you are going to run out of time at
Okay.
some point, so I mean, we've got to move on from this. You know, my comment here will be that you can have an opportunity to talk to both boards at a later date about funding this and whatnot. We really need to get to the budget here pretty quickly, because
Okay, my budget is
for that,
pretty-
I mean
pretty
the operating
straightforward.
budget, and if we have time left over after people have questions, we come back to this.
Okay.
But that really is a discussion for later, if you don't mind.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, you can take a look at what I'm suggesting as far as funding that project. I'll go to the next capital project, dredging. I think it's already kind of been discussed in the information that I provided. I submitted it as part of our operating budget. It was pulled out, and now it is an article. And I believe that's being recommended for free cash. And then the last article that I have is $250,000 for doing the engineering design for the land side of our project. As you know, Saquotucket Development Committee, one of which I'm a member, and Mr. Hart is the chairman, has been working hard on trying to come up with a site plan, a concept for upgrading our shoreside facility, and so the $250,000 is to start the engineering design of what we have proposed. I'll go to the questions now for our budget. Again, I have a relatively straightforward budget, not a whole lot of changes with regard to my operating budget. Salary and wages, really no significant difference other than the 2% increase per union contract for our full-time and year-round part-time and seasonal employees. The only real significance is longevity for one of my employees, Mr. Telesmatic, 3%. Fringe benefits, really a $250 increase for shoe allowance per the SIU contract. Utilities were adjusted as directed based upon a 5% increase for FY16. Building maintenance, I think, also has been covered. $4,000 went out of my budget to go to the centralized maintenance fund for DPW. In addition to that was the $550 maintenance contract for our FAST system, our septic system at our facility, also is now going to be managed by Sean Libby in facilities. Groundskeeping and supplies, I increased $1,000 this year because of the Downey property. And, you know, obviously that falls within our department. Not a whole lot is going on there yet other than, you know, last year we did some significant work to try to put up a new fence and put some stone down. And there's a path now that's been created to be able to access that from Saquotucket Harbor down into the Downey without having to go on Route 28. And so there's going to be some work on our part to maintain that facility. Capital Outlay Committee, the Capital Outlay line item, I've requested some money to run a freshwater line underneath the public ramp. There is already a conduit there, but it's going to take some work to get a line out there. Right now, you know, on the east dock, we have our pump out facility, we have our commercial offloading area, we have our patrol boat that is moored there. And the way we get water right now is we run a garden hose and wade it down to the bottom of the harbor across. And you know, we have to replace it every couple of years. We have to fish it out. It's just not right. So I'm trying to get water out to that part of the bulkhead area. Also, we're trying to pave the remaining part of a graveled area over there at the offloading area that needs to be done, and that building needs a little work to try to keep it up, that shack that we have out there that we use for storage of equipment and for our pump out system. My top priority was the dredging, and so we've already discussed that. It's now going to be out of free cash. So there is no real pricing fee changes this year, although I've made it clear to all our permit holders, both mooring and slip holders, and letters that went out with the renewals, that they should expect a fee increase next year to help fund the project that I hope gets approved at town meeting to redo the harbor. So I'm part of my plan is 10% rate increase for moorings and slips, and we'll look at the offloading permits as well. Our two receipts reserve funds we have, one of them holds our mooring fees and half boat excise tax in accordance with Mass General Law. We generate about $110,000 in that account annually. We have current balance of about $187,000. And then our other receipts reserve fund is our waterway user fee fund, where our waterway user fees get deposited annually. We generate about $76,000 annually in that account. We have a balance of about $260,000, and that fund is currently being utilized to pay the debt service on the $470,000 that we borrowed to do the Witchmere Pier, our cost share for the Witchmere Pier. And that's kind of my budget. If
Okay.
there's any questions.
All right, let's get the questions. Angela, we're going to start down there
first
this
this
time.
time.
See, yes.
I happen to think that the source of funds is important. It either comes out of taxes or it comes out of revenue that's developed. And it's important that we look at that. It's probably the most important financial thing that we do at this meeting, rather than doing gibberish by moving things from one account to another for $4. I think it's very positive that Waterways has tried to figure out a way to cover their cost. I think it's important that they come before the people shortly and present it, and so everybody understands where it's going. I also think in terms of other people who generate revenue, whatever kind of revenue it is, we should look at that to see how we can cover their own costs with that revenue, and then before we go on to other places. Because in essence, Waterways is getting, $150,000 of free cash. If you want to track that, you can track it out of their revenue that they're presenting, that they're not spending, or is not being spent on them. And I think we need to spend some time looking at what we do with the 10% of our fee that of revenue that we want to be held. I think it's important we hold it so we don't have any surprises. But I also think it's important at the end of the year that it go into some account or do something to pay where it's coming from. And we should look at this afternoon the beach situation. If indeed there are costs being carried and we do have fees, where's it going? I know they collect a good sum, and that's my comment.
Okay. Michael? Janelle?
Nothing.
Linda?
Just a request of, in the budget summaries, in the revenue section, that last year in FY16, we put basically all the budget money in wharfage, and then as it comes through the actuals, it's split out between ramp passes and all kinds of other things. And I see that in FY17 budget, all the money is once again stuck in wharfage and not in its components. Could we take a crack at breaking those out? Because it's really hard to look at actual versus budget when everything is in one line item and then it's all split out all over the place. So could we take a crack at that and maybe rearrange those little numbers and do that?
We
That would
absolutely
be a
can.
yes
We
or no.
actually did that last year, right before, Dave Ryan was still here at the time, and we had kind of separated him to kind of align with how we manage it within our office and kind of make sure it was going in the right direction, and so we can certainly do that again.
I'd appreciate that. Chris, if that could happen?
Yeah, sure.
It?
That's it.
Dana?
I'm good.
Jack?
You were talking about money you put in the budget for the Downey property maintenance. And I was wondering whether that work might better be done by the DPW for you as a customer of theirs, versus you're doing it and taking away from other things that are important for you to be doing and managing and worrying about. So, I'd like you to consider that. Maybe not this year, but next year. It just makes sense to me that you be focused on the rest of your operation and let DPW do the other things that matter.
Yeah. Okay, we certainly can look at that.
Ed? No. Larry?
No questions. Nice job.
Oh, Maureen?
Yes.
Rich?
Yes.
I'm counting on you.
Thank you. No problem. I just wanted to make a comment. John and Matt had spent a lot of time with the Capital Outlay Committee.
Yep.
And when John focused on Article 17, that's $7 million, which is a pretty big request, and one of the biggest articles in terms of dollar figures. And John spent a lot of time defending the position and defending the expense of $7 million, along with Matt, to the Capital Outlay Committee. And it was voted unanimous that it should go forward. And the analysis John was providing on that Schedule 5 was critical to the vote that got him the yay from the Capital Outlay Committee. I just want to note that and thank John and Matt for their work.
Okay, so the good news is we have 5 minutes left in the schedule, so I'd like to get back to that table. And I apologize for cutting it off before. We wanted to make sure we get to the budget stuff. So if you'd like to go back to that table and explain, I think the intent was to explain how you plan to fund this project.
So there's several sources of revenue that I think we can utilize to pay the bond on a 20-year note that will ultimately end up being around $6 million. The first one would be one of our receipts reserve account, account 1621, where our mooring fees and half of our boat excise tax goes. Right now, as I said, we collect $110,000 annually. I suggest that we take about $75,000 of that annual revenue and put towards the note. Not the whole amount, because that account is available for me to utilize with the approval of the town administrator should there be a maintenance issue that comes up or something unexpected from a waterways perspective. As I also said, I intend to raise fees 10%, is what I'm initially thinking. Obviously, it's up to the board, but should we do that, we would generate another about $70,000 in additional revenue in dockage and moorings, and I think that needs to go directly to paying the bond. 11 additional slips with this new design would generate about $75,000 a year addition, and most of our slips that are the new slips that are being created are in the 40-foot to 50-foot category, so obviously we get some significant revenue from those. We have an additional slip at Witchmere that hasn't been accounted for yet. This will be the first time we use it. We created another slip on the south side of that commercial pier, so again, we'll generate another $4,500 to $5,000 a year annually. And now that we have the Downey property, part of our plan, our site plan that we're looking at is to utilize that Downey property in the off-season for boat storage. I think we could lease 2 different areas of that lot to boat storage. We'll put it out there. I don't want to manage it, but we'll lease it, similar to what we do with Allen Harbor Marine right now. And I think we could generate in the range of about $35,000 if we do that. And then the last line item is, as has been discussed, you know, we generate a little over $1 million a year in revenue. And it takes, you know, our direct costs and indirect costs, it takes, you know, 500 or so to run the department. So we have surplus revenue. Some of that surplus revenue we take advantage of with dredging and some of these things in free cash. I recognize that. But a significant amount goes towards the general fund. And I think if we could grab a piece of that, not the whole amount, but I've suggested $150,000, some piece of that to put towards paying this bond. Again, there's a source there that I think would help us from you know, within the department to pay for this through harbor funds instead of going to the taxpayer.
I think it's important that we all recognize, I think we all do sitting around this table, and certainly a lot of folks in town recognize the importance of this asset, if you will, for economic development, for the, you know, just what people think of Harwich when they think of Harwich and being a seaside town, that type of thing. It is time. It's an unsafe facility at the moment, and we certainly appreciate everything you guys are doing to make best use of it the way it exists today. But this work needs to get done. There's no doubt about it. If we don't reinvest in the harbor, we're going to lose the harbor, basically. Not that it's going to, you know, collapse or something, but, you know, it is a major economic gem in this town. So we need to definitely figure out how to do this. Matt?
Yes, thank you. As far as the Waterways Committee, every month at the meeting, John presents to the public and the members what our financial status is and the planning going forward. At the last meeting, we went over in detail his plan, and it was voted on unanimously to go forward, and my committee does understand that. As far as Saquatucket development area, one thing's great, that the buildings are down thanks to some contributions from the town and other areas where Link worked. I'd like to thank our town administrator, Chris, because we were able to put together the basis of a preliminary site plan that saved the town the money that we would have to go to an outside engineer. The funding we're looking for is the next step in that. It's for the buildings, the sewage treatment plant license. But I'd like to thank, through Chris, his employees that did a great job in developing that.
Yep.
And that was also voted in favor and reviewed every month at those meetings. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you. There's more to come on this as we go forward and be getting the word out as to, the details of the plan and whatnot, and hopefully it will have a success at town meeting. And so,
Okay,
thank you.
thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Okay, we're going to take a 10-minute break till 10:15.